Last week, I lied to you. When I unboxed my 1995 Necromunda set, a time capsule from the golden era of Games Workshop, I found something incredibly rare. This is, as you can see from the front cover, the 1997 Citadel Miniatures price list. Now, why didn't I talk about it in the video? Well, there's two obvious reasons. First off, this being a 1997 price list sort of ruined the immersion of looking at a 1995 box set. But also, after having a quick glance at the prices in this, I knew it would open up a huge can of worms that would wriggle all over the Necromunda video. This little booklet deserves its own episode. And while you drool over these amazing retro paint jobs and wonder just how the hell a delicate 23-year-old booklet is in such good condition, let me fill you in on why this price list is so important. There's a real preconception in the hobby at the moment that Warhammer has been getting steadily more and more expensive. Now, I'm not talking about Warhammer compared to other tabletop games from different companies or even other hobbies. I'm just talking about Games Workshop's own price rises. The arguments people usually put forward for this compare prices for new releases with what models used to cost back in the day, or at least what they remember them costing. This is where we run into difficulty, and things can get a bit vague. Are your memories of those old prices accurate? Maybe when you got into the hobby, you were a kid like me, and much of what you got was gifted for birthdays and Christmas. And even if you're sure something is more expensive now, are you even comparing the same models to draw a fair comparison? Games Workshop put out a lot of great miniature catalogues, but they often had no prices. White Dwarf often had price lists for the mail order, but usually just for the new items they were showing off in that issue. This 1997 price list gives us a pretty comprehensive look at prices across different games and model types all in one place, so it should make for pretty interesting reading. Before we take a closer look, we need to cover a really important factor: inflation. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to deep dive into economics, the causes of inflation, price indexes, stuff like that. All you need to know is that the equivalent value of money is different today in 2020 than it was in 1997, for example. There are loads of handy tools around online that let you see what an amount of money from a point in the past is equivalent to now in whatever currency you choose. For example, in 1960, the average house price in England was about £3,000, which works out around £70,000 in today's money. Insert boomer joke here. A new Ford Escort would have cost you almost £7,000 back in 1983, and that's about 23 grand now. You get the idea. So for the purpose of this little peek back at Games Workshop history, £1 in 1997 is the equivalent to £1.83 now. Not quite double, but just about. That'll make it easier to draw some quick comparisons. Okay, enough chat, let's take a look. At the front of the catalogue we've got the price list for Warhammer, which became Fantasy and then sort of mutated into Age of Sigmar. Right at the beginning we've got the starter box. £50 back then is £91.69 now. The new Age of Sigmar Soul Wars box is £95, so in the same ballpark. A tiny bit cheaper, but it's not truly the same product, obviously. To be honest, only a handful of the things in this catalogue will be, but we're still conceptually talking about the same thing: the easiest way to buy two armies, the rules, and all the bits you need to play a game. The old army books are £15 each, £27.51 nowadays. That means that the current battle tomes have become actually slightly cheaper, at £25 per book. Now, I'm going to be honest here, I feel a bit intimidated looking at all this old world stuff. I'm not really into Warhammer Fantasy, and I know some of the armies no longer exist, lots of the armies and units have been renamed since this catalogue was released, and I'm not really sure what models are comparable with the current Age of Sigmar range, so don't hate me, but I'm going to skip ahead to the Warhammer 40,000 section, the range I'm most knowledgeable of, and we can start comparing prices. Straight to the big boy, the second edition starter set. £50 seems like a pretty reasonable price tag, but in today's money, that's almost £92. Compare that to the top tier 40k starter set available now, the Command Edition at £105, and that looks like a price increase of about 14%. Obviously the contents are hugely different. The old set has far more minis, but they're more basic. The new version has fewer minis, but they're much more detailed, and also has some cool plastic terrain pieces. There are, of course, cheaper starter sets available at the moment too. You can get a taste of the game for just £32.50 with the Recruit Edition, the equivalent of £20 back in the day. And there wasn't really anything like that sort of budget intro box in the 90s. The 40k codices also seem to be a bit cheaper in 2020, just like the army books and battle tomes. The old versions were £27.50 in today's money, compared to the standard £25 price point now. Just at a glance here, there seems to be some really huge variations. The old Katachan Jungle Fighter kit, for example, 10 models for £17, that's £31 today, but the modern-ish kit will only set you back £20. A different kit, sure, but essentially you're ending up with the same thing on the tabletop. How about Space Marine Dreadnought? £25 in 1997, which translates to almost £46 today. But the standard Dreadnought kit these days is only £30. Good news for Dreadnought fans, the hobby is over 30% cheaper than it used to be. Now, am I cherry picking here? Sort of. It's not just a one-way street, there are some huge price increases to talk about too, particularly when we talk about characters. The 80s and 90s were a bit of a magical time for Games Workshop character models. Many of them were just nicely sculpted single-part models. Maybe if they were really fancy, their weapons or arms were separate parts, but this simple design lowered production costs, and most armies had characters that cost between £4 and £9. Nowadays, characters are, well, let's just say they're a bit more expensive. For example, an Imperial Guard Commissar was just £4 back then, or about £7 today. The cheapest Commissar you can find in 2020 is £10. A Librarian in Terminator armour was a fiver in 1997, about £9 today, and the equivalent model, although admittedly it looks fancier, is twice the price. Mephiston was £7, £12.87 adjusted for inflation, but the new version costs twice that. There are some really crazy price increases too. Everyone's favourite lycra-clad serial killer, the Vindicare Assassin, was just a fiver, again about £9 today, but the updated model is a whopping £22.50. That's a 145% price increase. Now, as we've kind of seen, there doesn't seem to be any hard and fast rule or pattern here. Some things are a little bit more, some things are a little bit less, but what would be really useful is if we could see a summary of all the comparable models, their original prices, the inflated prices, and the 2020 price for the modern equivalent, maybe in a spreadsheet form, with a column showing the relative price increase or decrease. It would take a real nerd to put that together though. Okay, so I found about 60 things in this catalogue that you can still get a direct equivalent of today, from box sets to characters, vehicles to squads, books and paints. I've got their names, the old price, the inflation adjusted price, the cost of the 2020 equivalent, the difference in price as a percentage, and I've also categorised them, which might help spot some patterns in the price changes. Let's look at the big winners and big losers. Admit it, that's what you're here for. Okay, so the top 5 models that became cheaper over time were, at number 5, Chaos Space Marine bikes. Buying 3 back in 1997 would have set you back £21, and that's almost £40 in today's money. The modern squad is only £25. Now technically the Katachan squad is number 4, but I've already talked about them, so let's give Warp Spiders an honorary mention. Today, a squad of 5 costs £25, way less than the £37 they effectively cost altogether back in the day. A surprise entry at number 3, individual Necromunda gangs cost £26 today, but back in 1997, the cheapest way to flesh out a gang was to buy a box of 8 models, and then buy a leader and a heavy in separate blister packs. This added up to £22.50, so that's over £40 today. Another surprising entry at number 2, the Landspeeder model, a princely sum of £20 in the mid-90s, and it's still only £22.50 today. That's an effective price drop of almost 39% when you take inflation into account. And the biggest winner I could find in this list was also for Eldar, this time Wraithguard. 5 models bought individually would set you back £30. That's bang on £55 now, whereas the contemporary kit only costs £32.50. So that's a big price drop of almost 41% since 1997. Okay, that's as good as it gets. Now let's turn the tables and we'll see what had the worst price hikes. Coming in at number 5 with a 138% price increase, the Necromunda box set. The original cost £40, about £73 today, but the new Dark Uprising box set costs £175. Now, you might say that it's not a fair comparison, and that you get loads of high quality plastic terrain in the new box, but as you may know, I did a pretty comprehensive unboxing of that retro set last week, and the same could be said for that. You get about the same number of models, a large amount of modular terrain, but the rules in the old version were much more comprehensive, covering everything that was available in the game, rather than just the gangs in the box. Let's not mess around here. £175 is a huge investment to get into quite a niche game. The fourth biggest price hike was for a regular old Space Marine veteran captain, which would have set you back just £4 in 1997, £7.33 inflation adjusted. The updated model costs £18, more than twice the price. The different assassins all tie at number 3, costing just a £5 each as I already mentioned, seeing a 145% price increase now that their updated models each cost £22.50. At number 2 we've got Plague Marines. The cute old monopose plastic models cost just £5 for a squad of 5, so you could obviously double up to make a squad of 10 for a tenner. Pretty advanced maths going on here, are you still with me? Compare that to the 2020 equivalent, where to get a complete squad of 10, you need a box of 7 and then a box of 3 reinforcements. And that'll set you back £55 in total, a threefold increase on the inflation adjusted price of the retro models. Now, any guesses for number 1? The worst price hike in over 2 decades? Fate knew exactly how to rub salt into this particular wound. It had to be orcs. The humble Orc Painboy, which costs £17.50 to buy these days, cost just £3 back in 1997. Even when you account for inflation, that's still almost 220% increase in price. In practical terms, that means you could go and buy 3 of the old ones and still have some change left from that £17.50 it cost to buy the new version. Now, is the new model more visually impressive? Sure. Is it 3 times better? Well, I'll let you be the judge. Another way of trying to spot where the big changes happen is to look at the type of product. So I added some tags like character, squad, box set, vehicle, paint, and books. Now this surprised me. Games Workshop books saw an average price drop of 9%, but box games saw an average price increase of 42%. Characters saw a huge price increase on average, almost doubling across the board. The price of model paints also slightly increased, about 20% when comparing sprays, washes, metallics and regular paints, although it is interesting to note that metallics used to be more expensive than standard paints back then. The average cost of squads saw the biggest variation. Some things like Gene Stealers, Khorne Berserkers and Orc Boys saw big increases, often doubling in price, but some multi-model boxes like Space Marine Terminators, Cadian Shock Troops, Gretchen and Necromunda gangs have effectively dropped in price by at least 30%. There weren't enough terrain kits for me to make a fair comparison, but there were plenty of vehicles. This category saw the biggest average price drop, with only 2 of the models, the Rhino and the standard Leman Russ battle tank, going up in price. Every other vehicle or beast in this catalogue averages about 20% lower in price than its modern counterpart. So that about wraps up this little investigation. And what did we find out? Well, not much to be honest. Some things have become much more expensive, lots of stuff is about the same price, and quite a lot is actually cheaper now than it was back in the day. Stop press, Warhammer more expensive than it used to be, except the things that are cheaper. That's not a very catchy headline. Now if you want to take a look at this spreadsheet in more detail, there's a link to the Google Sheet in the video description, and a special thanks to Folix for correcting my lazy spreadsheet formulas. Huge thanks to our awesome Patreon family who help me bring you fun Warhammer videos every week. I mean, if you can call Warhammer economics fun. If you'd like to join up, you'll get access to our Discord server where you can chat with us, share your work in progress pics, and talk about pets, all that good stuff. When you join up, I also read out your name to thank you for supporting the channel. So here's our most recent patrons: Nightlord Al, Rebecca Fryer, Grulgor, Just Make Stuff, Pumper 1000, Nurgle Boy, Joe Humphrey, Jenny Annett, James White, Archdragon 340, Noble Nation, Mika Bounzerstora, Jeremy Holland, David K, Mike Grubbs, Sean Green, Kay Foster, Tyler Gale, Clint Mallet, Daniel Booth, Jump Paints, and Dr. Potato. I've been Guy, this is Midwinter Minis, thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.